Guys, what if I told you I just played the best MMO that has been made over the last 5 years? And no, I didn't go back to Lost Ark. No, I didn't play New World, rest in peace. No, it's not Chrono Odyssey. And no, it's definitely not Crystal Vatland. It's a game called SpiritVale. Never heard of it? Well, I'm not surprised. It's an indie MMO that is being developed by a single developer and has only been available as a playtest for 4 months. And let me give you an extremely interesting stat that by itself will likely make you wonder why you haven't played this game yet. This game had an initial player base of 335 concurrent players on Steam around when it first came out, and in its latest update, which added the Paladin class, it peaked at 344 players. Given that the game has basically had no marketing, it likely means that the majority of the initial 335 concurrent players probably came back to check this game out during its big update. How many games can you name that has this level of player retention between the first and second update? I definitely can't name any. And to be honest, the only way I found out about this MMO myself was because the developer had uploaded a video about it recently and it randomly popped onto my homepage. And watching it and seeing the familiar Ragnarok-esque combat numbers pop up gave me a huge surge of dopamine that I hadn't felt in years, and I knew I had to try the game. Just listen to this gameplay. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. But enough yapping. I'm sure you want to know what this game is about. Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's an MMO that takes us back to the simpler times. Back to the times where MMOs weren't filled with predatory microtransactions. Back to the time where MMOs didn't try to force you to play every day with time-gated, FOMO-inducing dailies and weeklies. Back to a time where the only reason why players logged in every single day to play the game was because all they wanted to do was grind. All they wanted to do was kill huge hordes of monsters, get some sweet loot, and make their characters stronger. And their reason for doing this was simple. It felt good to play the game, kill the monsters, and watch their characters grow. And this is SpiritVale, an MMO that takes us back to the roots of what made MMOs fun. Now, I'm sure the developer is going to be adding much more to this MMO since this is only in its playtest phase and not even in early access yet. But this is my experience playing SpiritVale and why I think, in my opinion, this is the best MMO of 2025. When I first logged into the game, I chose the Rogue class because it seemed very similar to Ragnarok Online's Rogue, and after creating my character, I was immediately dropped into the main town Navaris. To my surprise, this small MMO actually had quite a few active players running around the town, and for some reason I felt a surge of nostalgia rushing into my body. Something about not being greeted by an instance tutorial and instead being greeted by fellow players like myself in a bustling town brought me back to the feeling of playing my first MMOs back in the mid-2000s. And it's really interesting because at that moment, there were only 40 players online in the North American server, but yet the game immediately felt more like an MMO compared to the modern MMOs that have thousands of concurrent players online at once. From here, I saw an NPC with a quest marker above their head, and I immediately clicked on him. This NPC was Waybinder, whose sole job is to let you reset your skill points and stat points, and after talking to him, well, he didn't do anything. That was it. That was the only NPC in the town with a quest marker. So I did the next logical thing in my mind, which was to proceed to the first zone next to the town. This simple first interaction would probably be the foundation to my experience with the rest of my time playing this game. SpiritVale doesn't hold your hand like most modern MMOs do. There's no yellow paint telling you exactly where to go or what to do at every single moment. Instead, it encourages players to explore and let us carve our own paths for what we want our journey to be. And I really think that this is something that is completely absent in most modern video games, not just MMOs. And maybe this is the boomer in me talking, but every single game today is just holding your hand along the way every step that you take. It doesn't allow for player exploration, and it doesn't let players actually interact with the world and problem solve on their own. And being an MMO, this also means that players are never talking to each other to try and figure out what's going on. I remember playing MMOs back in the day when there wasn't as much information on the internet and there weren't discords and there wasn't a tutorial for every single thing that you did. So the only way I was ever able to figure things out was to actually talk to the people around me. And I could definitely see this being a common thing happening in SpiritVale because it doesn't baby the players. So from here, I entered into the first zone and I was greeted by some cute little bunnies, chickens, and flowers. And I immediately proceeded to wreak havoc and kill them all. And I have to say, and you might think this is an over-exaggeration, but killing these monsters felt so good. Everything down to the combat numbers popping out of the monsters' heads, to the sound effects of my character attacking, felt so good in my opinion, and this is the most important thing for any game. It needs to feel good to play, and oh my gosh, SpiritVale feels good to play. This is actually the thing that turned me off of playing Blue Protocol. The moment I hopped in, all of my attacks felt hollow. It was like I was swinging with my sword through some paper mache. Meanwhile, combat in SpiritVale, while not realistic like how you would feel playing a game like Elden Ring, felt very satisfying, which is likely the strongest aspect of the game. Now, after killing a couple of these enemies and crafting a cute little hat through the Craftsman NPC, I wandered into the next zone, which was the Forest Labyrinth. And much like the name suggests, it was an actual labyrinth. But it was here where I found out the hard way that this game really doesn't hold your hand. Since the game doesn't have any quests at the moment, you, the player, are left to your own devices to figure out where to level and how far to explore. And let me tell you, you can definitely get into zones where you aren't supposed to be at. And when you try to take on those monsters, let's just say you're gonna die. And that's exactly what happened to me. Having recently gotten my first AoE skill, I thought I was on the top of the world. But I was quickly brought back down to earth. Now, I think this is a great point to start talking about gear progression and upgrading your character. Of course, in typical MMO fashion, whenever you level up, you get stat points and skill points to upgrade your character, and these can be reset anytime in town for free. As for your gear, there aren't actually a ton of avenues to do so. The main way that you upgrade your gear is by honing the gear in town, and this follows a very cookie-cutter upgrade system. You spend gold and materials, and your gear levels up. The higher the level the gear is, the more likely the upgrade will fail and drop a level. You can use special materials to prevent your gear from dropping a level from failing the upgrade. Very standard stuff. But being a Ragnarok-inspired MMO, there's also a card system. Every single monster has a corresponding card that can drop, and those cards can do various things, from standard stat upgrades to giving you the chance to shoot out a fireball every time your character attacks, and you can imbue these cards into your equipment. But unlike in Ragnarok, the chance of dropping one of these cards is relatively high with a 1% drop rate, though if the monster itself is on the rarer side, that 1% can actually make the card very hard to obtain. There's also gems, which are a bit rarer than the cards with a 0.1% chance to drop, but these gems will directly upgrade the performance of your character's skills. And those are the avenues to upgrade your character's gear. Some people might see not having many avenues to upgrade your character as a negative, but I personally think that in these cases, simplicity is best, because MMOs can often have too many layers of character progression, which can create a huge barrier to entry for new players looking to try the game out for the first time. So after suffering my first defeat, I went and upgraded my gear a bit, and found out from a friendly chatter in my stream that I'd be able to find an upgrade for my dagger just a few zones before the one that I died in, and I knew that's where I needed to go. This chatter also helped me a bit by giving me a mask that gave me a haste skill, which increased my attack speed and movement speed by a significant amount. So thank you, sir. I also started to run into a bit of trouble with mana, so they also suggested that I should go kill some treants to try and farm them for their card, because it would give me some much needed mana regeneration. But the thing was, at this point, the treants were quite a bit lower level compared to my character. But I proceeded to farm them because I knew that these cards would help with my character's mana issue a ton, and this actually highlights something else that I think is quite unique about SpiritVale. In most MMOs, after you clear the beginning areas, you'll likely never go to those areas again because there isn't much value to farming lower level monsters. This is a shame because the developers put so much time into the different zones and monsters, only to have them become obsolete as more content is added to these games and it becomes easier and easier to level. But because of the card system, even lower level monsters and zones can have value for higher level players because you're able to find these valuable cards that only drop from those monsters, making these areas evergreen content that players will likely visit again and again across their different characters. And this was the gameplay loop. There was no voice in your ear saying, go here, kill 10 wolves, talk to the NPC with an exclamation point. Instead, your progression is defined entirely by the walls that you end up hitting and also your curiosity. You wander until you find monsters that are just strong enough to keep you on your toes, but not so strong that they one-shot you, and that becomes your new grinding spot. And honestly, that's the magic of it. That's the part that made me realize why this MMO hits so hard. Because in SpiritVale, the world is the content. Every new map is basically a little puzzle. You walk in, see what's trying to murder you, test your damage, test your survivability, and decide whether it's your turf or whether you're about to get folded like a lawn chair again. And if you do end up getting folded, then you have to figure out, well, is there anything that I can do to go and fix these problems I'm running into, or should I just try to go and level at a lower zone? Now at this point, you're probably asking, this game sounds amazing. Why aren't there more players? Well, first off, like I said earlier, there isn't much marketing going into this game at all, so it's not surprising that there aren't that many players playing the game. I think that this game definitely should be a lot more popular. But at the same time, even if it was more well known, I do think that the game will have issues finding a strong player base. And that is because of the fact that it is an indie MMO. Unfortunately, MMOs are extremely expensive to make and maintain. Even MMOs with huge companies backing them like Amazon Game Studio with New World, we've seen these MMOs shutter even though they have a very solid player base. And that's because it's just very expensive to develop the game, and you need to be bringing in a lot of revenue in order to cover the cost of upkeeping the game as well as developing content in the future. And I think that's why there's always going to be a level of player uncertainty about an indie MMO. No matter how good the game is, unfortunately, if it just doesn't have the infrastructure to make the game successful, then the game will eventually shutter. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case for SpiritVale, and I really hope it isn't. I really want this game to be successful because I enjoy playing it so much, but it's definitely always something that's on the back of my mind when I'm playing and leveling my character. I'm investing all this time, and it would be an absolute shame if that were just to disappear one day. But having said that, being an indie developed game also has its positive merits. It's actually pretty funny because on the first day of me playing the game, I was actually complaining about one of the areas in the game. The layout of the area was not great, and it would cause a lot of issues with some of the targeting of my skills. There's like some weird targeting issues in this area. Like, you see this? It's got like some weird clipping situation going on. And lo and behold, a couple hours later, they dropped a huge update with the Paladin class, and that area completely changed. Oh wow, whoa! This whole area is different. What the heck? Yo, that's sick. That's insane. I mean, there goes my complaints, or like, you know, my critique. This is likely something that wouldn't happen if it wasn't an indie developed game, or it would have taken a much longer time for them to implement this change. Now, I'm sure that it wasn't because of my comments that changed this, but at the same time, the game had only been out for about 4 months, and we already got that huge change that I felt the game needed in that area. So, there it is. That is my experience with playing SpiritVale on the first day. And I know I left out a lot of information about the game, such as advanced classes or maybe future content updates, but my goal with this video was to outline why I think that this game is so good, and hopefully encourage you to give it a shot. At this point, my character is a level 65 Shinobi, and I plan to continue to play it a lot more going forward. And hopefully after this video, I've convinced you that you should give this game a shot as well. If so, you can find me on the Sun server. My IGN is Misoshiru, so feel free to add me so we can play the game together. Thank you all for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys on the servers. Alright guys, peace.